All right, I'd love to introduce our last speaker of the day, Julie Mumford, the head of data at Zoom. And today, she's going to talk to us about the golden rule of prioritization, how to make an impact as a data person. Julie is passionate about developing people, building a privacy-forward architecture, and landing insights that improve how we design products for our user. She's earned her bachelor's from Dartmouth and her master's from Harvard Graduate School of Education. She has since helped some of the world's biggest brands use personalization and data science to stay ahead of trends and find new market opportunities. When she's not working, she and her family enjoy hiking and kayaking out in the Pacific Northwest. Please help me welcome to the stage, Julie. All right, I'm really excited about this talk. I think we're all data people here for the most part, and Julie's going to teach us how to have more impact as a data person. So, hello, Julie.
Hi, Kate. Thank you so much for having me. And of course, it's a tough act to follow with Vinay saying, here's how we can do it all in data mesh. So excited to be here.
Yes, thank you so much. I'll be back in about 10 minutes to take some questions from the audience. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thanks everyone for being here today. It's incredible to come to this community of like-minded data folks. I wanted to chat today about this topic that's very near and dear to my heart, which is prioritization. And one of the struggles that I see within data leadership at any organization is there's never enough data people, and there's never enough data resources, and the data's not available enough, and we need it's all of those things that all of us feel on a day-to-day basis. And I want to take a moment to recognize that 2 years into this, pandemic, burnout is real. And one of the things that happens at the end of the day is, as a data person, you wonder, did I have enough impact? I know I was busy all day. I know I was helping to solve problems, but was it enough? And did I work on the right challenges? And so I wanted to tell you folks my story of how I came to this framework for prioritization and how I use it, and have tried to instill that in my teams throughout my career. So first story is that after I had my first child about 8 years ago, I was back into the office, after about 4 months, and I did my normal thing. I got to the office around 8:30. I worked all day. I stopped a couple times to do the, breast milk pumping thing. I was like, I have a super productive day. Finally, around 5 o'clock, I was like, okay, I've done all the things that I need to get done. Now I need to start working on the sort of innovation projects that drive me as a data person that I feel really good about. And I finally, put my head on for a few hours, and all of a sudden it was 7:30 at night. And I was like, oh my gosh, I gotta get home. So I go back into the office, I pack up my breast milk, I get back on the bus, I go home, and it's 8 o'clock, and I land at home, and my husband has put down the baby, and I walked into my very quiet house, and I thought, oh my gosh, I'm doing it wrong. I'm absolutely doing it wrong. I thought I was prioritizing and making time for everything I need to make time for. And yet by the time I got home, I had missed my daughter entirely. She was off to bed for the night. And it was this jaw-dropping moment for me around, how do I not just scale through more hours of the day, but how do I have more impact in the time that I do have? Because quite frankly, there's never enough hours in the day. It is impossible to do everything that you want to do. And if you let it, the work will extend all the way out through your evening hours. It'll take up your weekends, it'll take up your vacations. And very quickly, you will get burned out eventually. And that is a pain point that I see in myself. It's a pain point that I see in my other teams. So I sat down to say, how did this happen, right? And one of the things that, after I did a lot of reading and a lot of talking to my stakeholders and talking to my teams, what I came to realize is that as a data person, fundamentally, we do 3 types of work, in my opinion. We do ad hoc work, we do operational and health related work, and we do innovation related work. That those are the 3 main buckets of the type of work that we do. And whether you're a data scientist or an analyst or a BI engineer, or whether you're an ML engineering expert, the reality is that you tend to be focusing on one of those 3 things. So let's talk a little bit about the type of work that falls into each of those 3 buckets and how to value them. So traditional product management, and I always think of data as a product. Traditional product management will say that the value of an effort is the reach. So how many people does this affect? How many systems does this affect? How many features does this affect? So reach times impact. So how much can you move that reach, right? That impact, I could move it by 10%, I could move it by 2%. Times your confidence, right? In your ability to execute against it, right? Do we think it's highly confident that the solution will work? Or do we think it's a little bit risky? And then you got to take that into account against the effort. What is the level of effort to get that sort of impact? So it's reach, impact, confidence, and effort, right? And based on that, you try and understand, where do I take in this work? Do I not take in this work? And whether you're using Agile or you're using Waterfall or it's Kanban, or whichever stakeholder is yelling at you loudest, the reality is you're probably thinking about that as you're valuing the work in terms of prioritization. The problem is that from a prioritization perspective, oftentimes what that means is we over-index on the urgent and the immediate, right? And so what I want to do as I'm talking to all of you is think through, what is ad hoc work? What is truly operational health related work, and what is innovation? And so the idea here is to set up your week with the right mix of ad hoc, operational, and innovation work. And I'll give you a little preview, which is that the golden rule for me is 30-30-40. This is what I remember, which is I try and spend 30% of my time on the ad hoc work, 30% of the time on my operational and health related work, and 40% of the time on that innovation space that needs to happen. And I think if you try to do this in your own life, I'd love to hear back from you on how it comes together. So that's the overview, but let's talk about it in detail. So the ad hoc work, all of us are familiar with that. It is, oh my gosh, the pipeline has broken. We need to go fix it. Like it is like, what's happening? Or, hey, what happened in Korea yesterday? Can you explain this? Or we're up 7%. What's driving up being up 7%? Or, it's the stakeholders who are urgently trying to make a decision, and they need something from you right away. And the reality is that if you let it, that ad hoc work will take up your entire week. It'll take up your evenings. It'll take up your weekends. It'll take up everything if you let it, right? And yet the ad hoc work is so important because it helps to build those relationships with our stakeholders, right? Our stakeholders need to trust us. We need to trust our stakeholders. And when they're asking questions, it's a really important time to say, what decision will you make when you have this information? What will you do with that data? Once I have repaired this thing that you're telling me is broken, but it's been broken for months, but now it's an emergency, like, tell me what you're trying to do, right? And really having the ad hoc relationship with your stakeholder, it matters. The second type of work is what I call operational and health related. And so as a data person, how I think about this is the work that we do operationally to understand what is the impact that our product is having out within the ecosystem, and so traditionally you might think of this as the work of doing OKRs, right? What are the objectives that we're trying to hit in these next 2 quarters, in this next year, in this next month? What are the key results that we are measuring? And so when I tell people to spend 30% of your time on operational and health metrics, what I'm saying here is spend the time to pick the right metrics, spend the time to set the right goals, to forecast your ability to hit those goals, communicate with your stakeholders around, do these look like the right KRs? And if they don't, let's talk about them. Are these sensitive to the interventions that we're going to have as a product team? And really getting involved in that. And that takes time. Those workshops can be hours long, 2 hours long. You might have to come back 2 weeks in a row to have those conversations, but it's so important to spend the time to pick the right metrics so that you will know whether you're making the right choices as you're developing your product, or whether your product is landing the way that you expect it to land. And so this operational and health bucket is not just intended to, hey, here's how for our forecast and here's how we're going to do, but rather when those numbers move, you should be proactively as a data person spending time understanding what moves those numbers, right? So when the number is up by 2%, what makes it move? Understanding and slicing and dicing the data to say, here's where we're doing really well in moving this number up. The number is declining. Here's where we're resilient to that decline. What's happening there and why? And spending that time proactively understanding why the numbers are moving. So often as data people, we can sometimes wait until the stakeholders have questions about why the numbers are moving. And it is critically important that we are operationally pushing out, here's our opinion of what's moving the metrics and why, right? And then you actually spend less time ad hoc answering questions from your stakeholders about it. And instead you're answering more interesting questions from your ad hoc. And operationally, you're building that relationship around that muscle that every day you know what those numbers are moving and why. And from an engineering perspective, oftentimes this can be the metrics on top of your system, your API, like how is it going? What is the developer experience, right? What is the latency? What is this? And you really need to understand what is moving those numbers and why. That is what this one is all about. So if ad hoc is about unblocking your stakeholders from problems and building relationships, the second part is becoming an expert in your data system around what moves the metrics that matter. And you have to spend time to get those sensitive metrics right. Which leaves the third bucket around innovation. And when I think about innovation, I think about what will we do to transformatively move our impact, right? So ad hoc is unblocking immediate questions. The work of operational health is understanding that drumbeat of how are we doing against our roadmap? What is that impact? The innovation work is spending the time to say, if we were getting to a whole new market, what market would that be and why? If we were to fundamentally think about, refactoring our code, right? Why would we do that? How would that help improve it? Like, how do we think about what needs to be done in order to improve that? So from an engineering perspective, when I talk to my teams, I think about our ability to handle tech debt comes out of this innovation bucket, right? Because we're not just operationally trying to fix things, but rather thinking very strategically around how do we not only take care of existing tech debt, but how might we prevent the adoption of future tech debt, right? It's also thinking through really deep insights around our audiences as a data scientist. Who are our power users? Why are they our power users? What are the predictive signals before someone becomes a power user? And how might we use our marketing efforts to nurture those relationships? It can also be issues around, I know there's a lot of leaders on this team thinking about organization. It's a lot about thinking about learning and development. We need to spend time developing our people. We need to make sure that they are feeling connected to the business, that they're working on the right cutting edge tools, right? And so for us as leaders, it's a lot around working in that space. And innovation can mean a lot of different things to different people, but I think of it as it's that expansive time when you are trying to solve big problems. And the reason that I say that the rule of prioritization, that golden rule is for me is 30, 30, 40, is that individually, the most important part of that work is the innovation. That's where I want myself and my teams to be spending 40% of your time working on those sorts of issues and solving them at scale, right? It is the singular most important thing about having impact is that if you're not thinking about innovation and you're not thinking about how to scale your insights, how to scale your communications about those insights, then those individual works that you're doing in the ad hoc and operational, it doesn't matter unless you're thinking about how to transform your impact. That said, together, the ad hoc work and the operational parts of it, they outpace innovation, right? And that's the biggest part of your week. And you're thinking through, how do I keep and maintain and build relationships with my stakeholders? How do I make sure that I carve out enough time to be sensitive? And how do I make sure that I am that drumbeat for my organization around, hey, we all agreed this is what would matter, and I'm going to talk to you about how the numbers are moving and why. Because otherwise, it's very interesting. The novelty bias always catches up with us, right? Where it's like, well, interest is this next thing, and yet if we can come back to those operational metrics, you can call them KPIs, you can call them OKRs. When you have a chance to come back to it and say, I know you want me to take on this work. How might it move this key result? How might it move this KPI? It creates a foundational way to make data part of every decision. Are we sure that we want to tackle this as an organization? Because I don't see the way in which it moves our key result, right? And it's really important. So fantastic. That's how I think about it. So Kate.
Awesome. Julie, thank you so much. I love the presentation. I think it's a great way for us to wrap up the conference. We do have some questions for you, but I love that we end on how do we as data professionals make more of an impact. And someone said that they're glad this that 30, 30, 40 actually adds up to 100, because otherwise we wouldn't be able to do this. Let's start with a question here from Joe. He's asking, do you find that asking the question, what do you want to do with the data, actually results in fewer ad hoc requests?
It does, although I will tell you that as data people, in my head, I think of the shorthand question of what do you want to do with the data? That's what I'm thinking about. But I hardly ever say that because I find that to be a really aggressive thing to say with stakeholders, because it's like, it treats the data like something I own, and then I think I'm going to share with you if you're worthy, right? Okay. And so I like to frame that question different, which is to say, tell me what type of decision you're trying to make. Mm-hmm. Right? What will you do differently with the, once I have this data, and make it more about a partnership of what we're trying to do, and to make sure that it's not that I own this valuable data and you only get it if you can prove to me that you're worth it. I think that's a really different dynamic.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. And then Tala says here that innovation should effectively reduce the operational and ad hoc efforts as well. And, loves the breakup of the sort of ad hoc operational innovation. Do you agree that spending 40% on innovation would actually reduce the time you need on ad hoc and operational work?
What it does for me is they're interrelated, right? So the better your ad hoc work is, right, and your ability to execute against it, that means that you are operationally unblocking your team, right? And so they put better items on the roadmap, and then then you set better KRs that really sensitively measure the business. And that once those are humming, then you go back into that innovation bucket, you think about driving, and the more you do to operationally drive the business, you can have insights that you wouldn't have had before, which relates to the ad hoc question of, well, what if we were to do this? How much would it do? And so it's a real cycle that operates together. And so you need all three of those pieces. Otherwise, they're not coming together. Yeah.
Right. And that absolutely makes sense. We do have time for another very quick question here from Anirudh. Wouldn't it be awesome if we can increase the percentage of innovation at the expense of the other two? Effectively, can we do 90% innovation?
I disagree, because the ad hoc work is very much about relationships, right? And it looks different. So tech leads, sometimes when I'm talking to my very senior tech leads who are saying, but what do you mean I can only spend 40% of my time on innovation? And what I try and get people to realize is that there's a lot of different types of ad hoc work. So when you think about teaching someone about something you developed in your innovation, that's an ad hoc effort, right? Like that's a way in which you're extending that into those one-off efforts, right? So I actually don't, for me personally, and everybody's different, but for me personally, that's like my golden rule of trying to aim them together.
Okay. Well, Julie, it looks like we have like 60 seconds left. So I'm going to have to thank you so much for your time so we can wrap up. Really appreciate you helping us close out the conference here. And we'll see you online. Thank you again.